everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name's Matt, and today is April 20th, 2020. Some of you might better know today as 420, and I couldn't think of a better day to talk about marijuana stocks. So, what I wanted to talk about today is marijuana stocks, kind of how I view them as an investment, and if it's something that I feel is right now a good time to invest in. Now, with all of that being said, I just want to be clear that by no means am I taking like a political stance on this, and I don't want this to come across as a political stance. I know that this could be a touchy subject between both parties, but this is just kind of my opinion on the overall industry. Politics aside, of course, we'll have to talk about regulations, but again, it's anything that I'll try to mention when it comes to political point of views will just be more fact based than opinion based or taking a side or anything like that. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started with talking about marijuana stocks and if it's a good time to invest. So, investing in marijuana stocks has really been a hot topic over the years. Really, ever since it became legal. I forget exactly what year that was, but when Colorado made it recreational marijuana legal, it's been something that everybody's been talking about. And a lot of people seem to have mixed views when it comes to this as an investment, whether it's a good investment, a bad investment, a cheap investment, if it's risky, all of that. So that's what I wanted to kind of talk about today. Now, of course, the first thing we'll talk about is since I'm in the US, I'm in North Carolina, where it's not either medical or recreational legal. Every state seems to have its own different laws. So I found this map from normal.org that shows each state and what they have legal. And as you can see, these rules and regulations really vary dramatically between each state. And that's because at the federal level, it's still illegal, but at the states, they've kind of been given their own, or their ability to go about it as they please. And as you can see, really the only two states in the United States right now that have absolutely zero involvement with marijuana is Idaho and South Dakota. So that always raises a little bit of a question to me when I look at this because you wonder how a state like Idaho, as you could see, that's very close to Oregon, which is basically legal across the board, Washington, Nevada, all of those have it legal and not far away from Colorado. So you wonder how that affects states like that it's, so close in proximity. What's going to stop somebody if you live right here in Washington or in Idaho? What's going to stop you just from driving right there to Washington to go pick it up? And that creates like a whole legal aspect of it. So that's where kind of my questioning comes in is how are states handling the different levels? Also, too, when you look at a map like this, you realize that each state having its own rules means that even if it's recreational in certain states, it might be challenging to be able to build a business that reaches multiple states because everybody's entitled to their own requirements and regulations, which is not an easy task. It's going to make it very challenging for the people that are starting these companies to be able to have a growth plan in place. Now, with that said, though, there are multiple ways that you can invest in the marijuana industry. You can do that through medical companies, which personally I believe is going to be the better long-term play. I think that the medical side of it has a little bit more upside or more potential to it than the recreational, but I think both of them have their opportunities, and we'll get more into that later. With that said, you can also invest in recreational. So that's just go to your store, pick it up, follow their rules and do with what you want. CBD, so that's like the non-psychoactive ingredient for marijuana that everybody talks about as well. You'll hear of it helps people with like seizures, or it's like a calming agent or something along those lines. So it's the non-psychoactive version of it, so it doesn't get you high or anything like that. Then there's hemp. So hemp, this always raises a lot of question. Hemp is like the material of marijuana. So that's where you'll see like hemp bags, hemp clothing, hemp toilet paper. It's really a universal product, and it has a lot of different applications that can be used. So to me, that's also kind of a promising industry, is knowing that it's not something that really is being looked at or taken into consideration, but it has a lot of practical uses, and it's completely aside from using this to consume. It's more of actually using this as a tangible and physical product. So I think that's an interesting area. as well as equipment. Now, by equipment, that is really just a vague definition. Equipment can be anything from the I don't know, the soil used to grow plants, the packaging that they use for either individual items or, little cartridges or anything like that. It could be the grow facilities, it could be lights that they use to grow plants, it could be payment processing systems. So anything that's involved with the growing and distribution of marijuana. So, there's a few different avenues or a few different angles you can really approach the industry, but of course, each of them are going to have their own risks and they're all going to have their own potential. So, what makes this a potentially attractive investment for me? Well, the first one is that this is a new market, and with any new market comes new opportunities. And really, this space has so many different areas for you to be able to get into that the opportunities are really abundant. You can again look into packaging, you can look into different growing operations, you can look into the medical side. There's even private investments that take place in this sector. You could maybe look into the recreational side, or maybe find some kind of, I don't think a delivery service would work, but so there's a lot of new opportunities that could come with this. Now, granted, for the most part, you do have to be in a state that has either the recreational marijuana or the medical marijuana, but if you are in one of those states, or if you're in Canada, you have a lot of opportunities to create something unique and kind of find your own niche in this market while it's still a very young market. It's also a relatively low cost investment, and the relatively is very important there, because if you've seen my channel, my other videos, you know that we don't say something's cheap because of the stock price. You get that based off evaluation of it. But with that being said, this time and probably this time only, I am going to say that this is a cheap investment, specifically speaking to costs, because these shares are, I think the highest I saw was around $17. For the most part, they're penny stocks. So it is a way for you to experiment with different businesses as an investment without breaking the bank. If you were to try to decide if Facebook, Amazon, or Google is a good investment, buy a share of each of those, it would cost you a lot of capital. Where these, you can see different companies, invest in them as you learn about it, or my suggestion is always put it on paper trading first to see how it does for you, and then learn about these companies and how they position themselves in different ways and what makes them unique. There's also a lot of growth potential. Since this is such a young market and it's still a relatively unexplored market, I feel like the growth potential is infinite. This can really grow to as large as we allow it to. Now, obviously, there's going to be regulations that get in the way, and that's what we'll have to watch out for. But if you're a dividend investor, this is not a sector you should be looking at, because I don't think any of these companies would consider themselves fully grown to where they feel comfortable paying out dividends. They're still looking to grow their business. They're looking for the different areas they can expand into, new product lines. With the regulations being so iffy and always changing, it gives them a reason to hoard cash, because they don't know what's going to happen and they're still going to need cash to operate. So the growth potential for these is definitely there. But again, it's not something that you should get into if you're specifically looking for a dividend investment. The other thing that really stands out to me for this as an investment is that it has an existing client base. So it's strange to think about there being a new product to hit the market and there already be an existing client base. Because in theory, that doesn't make sense. How could there be a new product and existing client base? Well, obviously because of the illegal uses, it's already has a demand there. So if laws and regulations were to loosen up, then the client base is there, the demand is there. So I really don't see a problem with any of these existing companies being profitable in the future, especially if they're run well and they're run by people who know how to run a company. Then I think that, again, the growth potential is going to be there. And really, when it comes to demand, I don't think that'll be an issue. I could see supply being an issue, but that's something that we would kind of have to see as time goes on. So there are obviously risks associated with this. The biggest one being government regulations. So one of the big issues with dispensaries or these companies is that, again, at the federal level, marijuana is still illegal. So these dispensaries and companies a lot of times don't have access to banks, which is huge. So a lot of them are a cash only operation, which, as we know, in times like this is not very safe because nobody's really handling cash right now. But also that just makes them prone to robberies or, other kind of frauds. So counterfeit money, or again, if you're holding on to a lot of cash and you get robbed, that could wipe out your entire business. So I'd really like to see them be able to work with banks, even if it's not legal at the federal level. I think the ability to take certain credit cards or debit cards, or just the ability to not have to physically hold on to your cash, is going to do a lot for these companies. And that's something that I would like to see, but for the time being, that's something I view as a risk, as well as the FDA. Because the FDA hasn't really studied this that much. They're still studying it, so they don't know the effects of it. And I would say until it's been around for 20 years at a legal level, then you're always going to hear conflicting information. You're always going to hear stories that get skewed. And the information isn't going to be consistent because there's never really been an opportunity to study this on a long-term basis. There's also a pretty hefty black market for marijuana. If you saw it in California when it first became legal, California just completely taxed it. They put on way too high of a tax for this. And ultimately, the black market was creating a price ceiling for marijuana because why would you go to this store and pay $400 when you can get the equivalent from some guy on the street for $200 if it's, same product, same all that stuff. So the black market is definitely thriving off this. Again, kind of going back to that map we saw as well. If you live in Idaho and you have 3 states around you, all with legal and recreational marijuana, what's really going to stop those residents from going there, going to multiple dispensaries and picking up a large sum of their product, and then just redistributing it back in Idaho? And the downfall there is the states surrounding it are going to be able to capitalize on those taxes that they have from selling these products. But Idaho is going to miss out on those taxes and ultimately is going to spend more money trying to reinforce the fact that this is illegal back to the people. And also, there's really just a lack of knowledge about it because it was really for something that's been around for so long. It's crazy how much of a lack of knowledge there is. But it's been illegal really starting in the 20s. I don't think it officially became illegal until 1937. So it hasn't even been fully illegal for 100 years. And before that, people were using this as a medical or medicinal product. So with that, I think that there's just a lack of knowledge there because we weren't able to conduct the studies to see how this would, affect development in the brain. It could stunt your growth. What happens if you use it at a young age versus an older age? What's the difference between a daily user and a monthly user? So that's going to be one of the challenges and one of the risks. So now we could talk about who the main players are in this industry. Now, the stocks that I chose for this are companies that are specifically focused on marijuana, so it's not like something they have like a little investment in or anything like that. This is how these companies operate. And the first one I have is Curaleaf. Ticker symbol is CURLF. And they're a huge company. It's really hard to find consistent information with these because they're not being reported on as other companies are. And they're kind of still developing as well. It's to my knowledge, though, that Curaleaf is a 100% medical investment. So they have a mix of, or they might be both. I'm not sure. But they're, one of those companies that is growing very well and is actually remaining profitable as a marijuana investment. So they seem to be ones that if this becomes legal or if there's a change in the way that it's regulated for the better for these companies or for their benefit, that is going to do very well just given that they operate in multiple states. They are a profitable company, and from what I was able to find about them, it sounds like they run like a well-oiled machine. So that's one that I would keep on my radar if this is something that I was looking at. The next one is Canopy Growth Corporation. They're one of the more popular ones that you'll hear of because they have investments by Constellation Brands, which we'll talk about later. But they're also another one that seems to be just a more well-known, well-run operation and is investing a lot in their growth and in their product line. I was on their website and I saw that they had a large number of different products that they offer, which is good to see. I guess for this being a new industry is really just to have like a one-stop shop. Obviously, that's what we'll need. But I'm also interested in seeing if there's companies that are going to learn how to focus on products, whether that be just the actual plant matter itself, or if it's going to be on, topicals, those hand lotions, or if it's going to be in, extracts. So that's kind of what I'd like to see. But Canopy Growth seems to be one of those more well-rounded companies that is really trying to have a foot in every single door of the marijuana industry. And then lastly is Tilray. So this is a big one for Canada. I think that they are also a medical company, but they could just be recreational. Again, there was very conflicting information on these, but these are the biggest players. And by that, they have large market caps, relatively speaking, towards the sector. Again, they're all probably considered small cap companies, but these are the ones that are well run companies from what I can see and have a brand built already. So really, they're more waiting on for regulations to kind of be changed so that they can really start to soar as a company. Now, this is something though that I found pretty interesting is just alternative ways of investing. And if you've seen my channel, you probably know that this is kind of the way that I like to approach investing. So it's very simple. And the way I'll describe it is I'll use Tesla as an example. So Tesla right now might not be a company that I would invest in. It is a company I would invest in because I believe in Elon Musk. But if I'm looking for something a little bit different than a Tesla investment, what I might look for is the company that makes the sensors for the self-driving car. And because self-driving cars is going to become huge in the future, and those sensors are its own product that actually a lot of companies don't make, or a lot of car manufacturers don't make on their own. They buy it from somebody else. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking with this is let's maybe not invest in the companies with the marijuana themselves, but the companies that are helping support this indirectly. So the first one you'll see is Scott's Miracle Grow. This one weirdly shows up in every marijuana ETF because I guess it's a good soil. I really know nothing about horticulture, so can't really say much about if it's really good for growing or if it's organic or any of that. But it just seems to be a really good company that people are investing in, I guess, when it comes to marijuana. And the next one is Constellation Brands. So they're like a beer, wine, spirits company, but they are the ones that invested heavily in Canopy Growth Corporation, and they're actually working together to try to come out with a infused drink or beverage, as they're calling it. So just another way, again, for people to be able to consume marijuana without the harshness of like actually smoking it. You'll also see here that I listed 2 ETFs because, as you know, I'm a diversified investor. And I would say that rather than trying to pick which one is going to be the one that soars, this is where an ETF is really going to be helpful because you're buying a basket of these companies, which could include Scott's Miracle and Constellation Brands. So it's just more of a way to buy the market or buy a basket of these investments and not have everything just super concentrated into one investment. That goes for really all of them, my investing style, but especially in such a speculative market, I think that this is the best way to approach it if you're going to put money into the market as soon as possible for these marijuana companies. Then as an added bonus here, I included Yum Brands, more or less of a joke because that's the company that owns Taco Bell. But yeah, so Yum Brands as well. So my thoughts. Again, I don't want this to come across as political by any means, so I'm going to just try to make this very more about my thoughts, and hopefully you don't think that I'm taking any kind of political side here. But I would say there has to be a change in mindset. I think there's still a stigma floating around the marijuana industry that it's all, Tommy Chong's or Doug Benson's that are running the whole industry. And that's really not the case. I think a lot more people are starting to use this as a product. There's people like John Mayer that, he doesn't drink, but he smokes weed. And you got to have people that are more like business minded than just like hippie looking. Hippies are funny and everything, but I think that it has to be taken more seriously. Imagine if like the Dos Equis commercial was with Tommy Chong instead of that one guy I don't always drink beer. So I think that that would be one of the first things that has to change is just how this is viewed as an industry, not just something that'll make you lazy, eat your entire fridge, sit on the couch, and you won't do anything for the rest of the day. There's also the huge need for banks to assist. Now, I've already talked about this, so I won't go ahead and continue on it, but just to kind of reiterate, these companies cannot be holding cash. I think that they really need to have a way to be able to deposit their money. I think that if they were able to work with a bank, then it could even be taxed at the federal level, which is going to get more money back at the federal level. So I think that there needs to be a way for these companies to work with banks, maybe starting at the state level. But I think once it hits the state level, we need to make a push for that to be at the federal level. Because, as I said, this could be a great source for tax revenue. It's something that I fully think should be, have an excise or a sin tax on, just like alcohol or tobacco. And to me, that just makes sense. I think that it's something that, if you want to use it, you'll pay a little extra for it. And then that way, that money can go back into these states. Especially right now, we all know about the stimulus packages and unemployment hitting record high levels, and this money's kind of coming out of nowhere. So I think that this could be a good opportunity for it to become legal, just because that's a lot of revenue that'll help pay back all of these packages that have been given out. And it'll do it relatively quickly. I think it's like a $40 billion a year industry when it comes to taxes. Don't quote me on that number, but it's definitely a number worth taking into consideration. And then also, we really just have to anticipate learning curves. As I mentioned with California, they had the really high taxes, so people were going to the black market instead. So I think that it's going to be a little bit of a checks and balances system where it's, people are going to immediately want to tax really high to get the revenue, but we have to tax it at an appropriate level where it makes it more desirable than going through the black market. And how does it work cross state lines, all of that. So we all have to anticipate that this isn't going to just be a one day, bills written, everything's going to be fine. I think that we'll have to know that if something were to change, it's going to always be changing, at least for the next 10 plus years, I would imagine, because we're going to learn new information. There's going to be new companies, new products, new distribution methods. What's going to happen with, the Mexico border with marijuana or the Canada border? If it's legal in all three of those, can you just travel safely with it? All of that. So I think that there's going to be a lot of learning curves that are associated with this before it becomes a legitimate investment, at least in my opinion. And it's really all I have to say about it. So I guess overall, is this something I would invest in? Short answer is no, but admittedly it's something I have my eye on because I think it is an exciting opportunity. I think that there is a lot of areas for opportunity, a lot of ways for taxes to be generated from this. I think that it's going to create a lot of jobs. People are going to have the ability to maybe work with something that they like. If we can get rid of criminal records, that'd be kind of cool. But I don't think it's something that I'm ready to invest in quite yet. So again, something I'll keep my eye on, but I'm going to maybe sit on the sidelines for a little bit and see how other people do with it as an investment before I jump in. So hope you found this video helpful. Many of you, I'm sure, are staying home today, so that's good. Go ahead and make sure you're staying safe, staying healthy. As always, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're right here with me, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for taking the time to watch this, but I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you Wednesday for the Watch List Wednesday.